My parents gave my childhood bedroom to my sister's new husband, so I left a note. Moved out and never gave them my new address. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and I've always felt like the black sheep of my family. Growing up, my parents had this weird way of celebrating my sister like she was some golden trophy while I was invisible. Birthdays came and went, and somehow hers were always bigger, brighter, more important. My achievements barely earned a nod, but if she so much as hummed a tune or got a B on a test, it became a family gala. I remember lying in my bedroom at night, staring at the ceiling and feeling this quiet resentment, wishing I could just disappear without anyone noticing. That room was my sanctuary. Walls plastered with posters of bands I loved. Shelves cluttered with books I spent hours reading. Trophies and sketches no one cared about. It wasn't just a room. It was the one place where I felt I existed on my own terms. The smell of old carpet and the faint hint of vanilla air freshener my mom insisted on was comforting in its own weird way. Even the scuffed corners of my desk, the dented drawer handle felt like part of me, part of my history. Of course, my sister's room was always painted in pastels, adorned with ribbons and scented candles, a constant visual reminder that she was the favorite. Family dinners were theater. Look at her grades. Isn't she just so talented? And me? I was lucky if I got a good job tossed over my shoulder while everyone clapped for her. I tried to speak up once, just a small complaint, and my parents laughed. I felt small, almost invisible, but there was this simmering anger I couldn't quite shake. I never told anyone how it hurt. Friends got the short version. My sister's just special. But behind closed doors, I'd clench my fists, imagining a life where I mattered just as much. And in the back of my mind, I swore, someday, if they thought they could overlook me, they were going to be in for a surprise. But I had no idea how soon that day would come, or how badly it would hurt when it did. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the house smelled faintly of my mom's cinnamon rolls, the one thing that usually made me feel like home. But that day, it barely registered. My parents were unusually chipper, and my sister had that smug little smile plastered across her face. Then my dad dropped it casually like it was nothing. "So your sister's getting married next month." "We're really excited." I forced a smile, said congratulations, but inside something twisted. My sister had a fiancé now, a man I barely knew, someone stepping into the golden child spotlight. And somehow, I had this gut feeling that my world was about to shift again, and not in my favor. My mom went on about wedding plans, colors, themes, and I nodded politely. But each detail sounded like a personal slap. The new furniture they were picking, the remodeled rooms, the fresh start for the happy couple. At dinner, the tension was thick, almost tangible. My sister giggled, teasing me about some insignificant thing from work, and my parents laughed, just like they always did. My complaints or observations were brushed aside. My voice didn't carry. The air felt tight, like I was a ghost at my own family table, watching them plan a life I was only tangentially part of. Then my dad said it, the line that hit me like a punch. "We were thinking your old room could be perfect for your sister's husband once he moves in." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth, and the cinnamon roll on my plate seemed suddenly stale. I wanted to speak, to argue, but the words lodged in my throat. How could they do this? How could my childhood, my safe space, just be handed over like a disposable gift? I clenched my fists under the table, staring at the floor, heart racing, wondering if I should storm out or just sink deeper into silence. And in that moment, a quiet resolve began to form. I couldn't let this slide. I wouldn't just sit here while they erased my childhood. The following week, my parents cornered me in the living room like it was some kind of casual family update. "We've finalized the plans," my mom said, her voice almost cheerful. "Your room will be for your sister's husband." "We thought it'd be best if he felt at home." I blinked, waiting for the punchline. It never came. I couldn't believe it. My room, my sanctuary, was being handed over without a single discussion. Every poster, every shelf, every tiny corner of my space, all of it was about to belong to someone else. I opened my mouth, ready to protest, but my dad waved it off. "It's just temporary until you find your own place." Temporary? That word tasted like ash in my mouth. I tried to reason with them. "I've lived here my whole life. Those walls, they mean something to me." My sister smirked, leaning against the doorway, eyes glinting with some unspoken triumph. "Come on, it's just a room," she said casually, as if erasing someone's memories was no big deal. My mom laughed nervously. "Honey, you'll be fine. You're grown up now." The truth hit me like a wave. I wasn't just being pushed aside. I was being erased. And the worst part? They didn't even see it. To them, this was normal, reasonable, a simple adjustment in the grand scheme of their perfect family. Meanwhile, I felt small, invisible, and angry in a way that settled deep into my bones. I went to my room later that night. Running my hands over the desk, the scuffed walls, the faint smell of old carpet and my childhood memories. Every item felt heavier, loaded with significance they would never understand. I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping my knees, thinking about all the times I'd been pushed aside for my sister, every overlooked birthday, every tiny achievement ignored, and in that quiet darkness a plan started forming. I wasn't going to sit here and let them erase me. They might think this is a minor inconvenience, but I knew one thing. They had underestimated me. I just didn't know yet how far I'd go to prove it. That night, I lay on my childhood bed for the last time, staring at the ceiling like I always did, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. The posters that once made me feel alive now seemed like relics of a life my family didn't care about. I kept turning the decision over in my mind. Should I stay and swallow this betrayal, or should I leave and finally take control of my life? I thought about the practicalities. I didn't have a plan, not really. I wasn't ready to sever ties completely, but staying meant giving in, letting them win, letting them treat me like a disposable piece in their little family drama. Each passing moment my resentment grew. My anger simmered into determination, though it was tangled with fear. I felt like a volcano waiting to erupt, unsure if I'd explode or quietly disappear. I replayed every childhood slight in my head. The times I'd cried in silence while my sister got praised. The nights my accomplishments were shrugged off. The constant comparisons that made me feel inherently less. And now this, my room, my last piece of security, being handed to someone who didn't even know how much it meant. It felt like the final straw. I imagined leaving a note, something that said everything I couldn't voice in person. Not a screaming confrontation, too petty, but something that forced them to see me, even if just on paper. The thought gave me a flicker of control in a world that had always left me powerless, and yet doubt gnawed at me. Could I really walk away? What would they think? Would my sister even care? My stomach twisted with the weight of indecision. But deep down, I knew one thing. If I didn't leave now, I might never find a way to reclaim my life. Something inside me had snapped, a quiet, steely resolve settling over my fear. Tomorrow, I promised myself, I would do something irreversible. By the third day, the reality of my situation hit me like a freight train. I realized my parents would never see things from my perspective. They'd never understand how much that room meant to me, how every scuffed wall and shelf held pieces of my childhood. It wasn't just a room, it was my identity, my memories, my safe space. And now, it was being erased, handed to someone else, while my parents acted like nothing was wrong. I tried to talk to them one last time. "Can we just compromise? Maybe he can use the guest room?" My voice wavered, betraying my desperation. My dad shook his head firmly. "No, it's for him. You need to grow up and move on." My mom avoided eye contact, muttering something about tradition and family harmony. I felt invisible again, like all my emotions were irrelevant. Like I didn't even exist in the space I had lived in for 26 years. Sitting alone in my now lost bedroom, I felt a crushing mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. Memories of every overlooked achievement, every ignored birthday, every time I'd been treated as second best swirled together, and I realized this wasn't just about a room. It was everything. My parents' favoritism had left scars that were deeper than I'd admitted. And this final act of erasure pushed me to the edge. Tears came unbidden. Not just for the room, but for the years of being undervalued, unseen, and silenced. I felt utterly powerless, trapped in a family that loved appearances more than people. For the first time in a long while, I let myself feel completely defeated. And yet, in that rock-bottom despair, a strange clarity emerged. I couldn't change them, but I could change me. I could take back control of my life, even if it meant leaving everything behind. I reached for a notebook, hand trembling, as a plan began to form, a plan that my parents would never see coming. I sat at my desk under the dim glow of the old lamp, the shadows stretching across the room like memories I couldn't shake. This wasn't going to be some theatrical tantrum or a goodbye drenched in melodrama. It had to be clear, sharp, and impossible to ignore. My fingers shook as I uncapped my pen, but the act of writing felt like a dam breaking inside me. I've spent my entire life feeling invisible in this family, I began. Every achievement I had was ignored. Every birthday, every holiday, every small victory was celebrated only for her. And now my room, my sanctuary, is gone, handed to someone else as if it meant nothing. Do you realize what that feels like? The words bled onto the page, years of favoritism, small wounds, and quiet heartbreak condensed into a single moment of truth. I wrote about the subtle comparisons, the dismissive laughter when I tried to speak up. I didn't want to humiliate them. I wanted them to see me, even if only through paper. The final line felt like a blade and a balm at once. I'm leaving. I'm taking my life, my space, and my dignity with me. Don't expect me to come back. I carefully placed it on the kitchen counter, imagining their reactions, the shock, the confusion, maybe even a flicker of guilt. My sister would see it too, and perhaps for the first time, she would understand the cost of her own comfort. Empowerment surged through me, but a deep sadness lingered. This was the family I loved, yet who had never truly seen me. I packed a small bag quietly, running my fingers over the scuffed walls and familiar corners of my childhood room one last time. When I closed the door behind me, a chill ran down my spine. They had no idea this was final. No idea I wouldn't be coming back. The alarm went off before dawn, but I was already awake, staring at the ceiling of a room that no longer felt like mine. The house was silent, except for the low hum of the fridge in the kitchen. The air felt colder than usual, almost biting, and my breath came out in small clouds as I opened the window for one last breath of the place I had called home. My room smelled faintly of cardboard and old paper now, the scent of every box I'd packed the night before mingling with the familiar vanilla my mom loved. I moved quietly, methodically. Clothes, books, a few sketches, and one photo frame. Only what I could carry went into the bags. Each taped box felt like sealing away another part of my life. My heart pounded in my chest as I zipped up the last bag. The hallway creaked under my weight, the same creak I'd heard since I was a kid. But now it sounded like a farewell. As I loaded my things into the car, the liberation hit me in waves, sharp and bright, but anxiety followed close behind, like a shadow. Would my parents call? Would my sister laugh? Would they even care? I pictured my sister's expression when she read my note. Imagined my parents' confusion or denial. For the first time, I didn't care enough to wait for their reaction. The streets were empty as I drove away, quiet, gray, a world waiting for me to claim it. No neighbors, no witnesses, no one to stop me. I hadn't left a forwarding address, no hint of where I was going. They couldn't reach me, couldn't pull me back, couldn't dismiss me again. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, heart hammering. I didn't know where I'd sleep that night or what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in my life I felt free. And freedom, even laced with fear, tasted better than silence. It was mid-morning by the time my phone started buzzing. I was sitting in my car parked outside a cheap motel 2 towns away, my bags stacked beside me like a barricade between the old life and the new. I hadn't even checked in yet. I just sat there staring at my phone, screen lighting up with call after call. Mom, Dad, home. I didn't answer. Not one. I could picture it clearly. My mom walking into the kitchen, seeing the note sitting like a wound on the counter. My dad reading it with that dismissive frown of his, ready to call me dramatic. My sister hovering behind them, smirking, then slowly realizing this wasn't a tantrum, but a goodbye. Maybe she felt slighted that I hadn't confronted them face to face, maybe not. But I imagined the shift, the first crack in their perfect narrative. Text messages began to roll in. Where are you? You're overreacting. Come back and let's talk. My dad's was the harshest. You're acting childish. We'll clear out your things. My mom's was softer, but still clueless. Honey, let's just discuss this. It's not that serious. Their words stung because even now they didn't get it. They didn't see the years of erasure behind this moment. They still thought it was about a room. I muted my phone, staring at the blank motel sign outside, its flickering letters casting weak light over the cracked pavement. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and damp concrete. Nothing like home, but it was mine now. I felt both vindicated and hollow. This was freedom, but it came at a cost. In that quiet moment, the weight of my choice pressed down on me. They had no forwarding address, no way to follow, no control left. For the first time, I'd done something they couldn't undo. But deep down, I wondered, what would happen when the consequences of their favoritism finally came crashing down on them? It had been a week since I left, and I was finally starting to settle into a small apartment that smelled faintly of old carpet and fresh paint. I had started unpacking, arranging my things in a way that felt right for me. My space, my rules, my life. That's when I got a call from a friend who'd stayed in touch with the family. They're having issues, my friend said hesitantly. Your sister's husband. He's not exactly what everyone thought. He's demanding, controlling, and, well, not very nice to her. My stomach twisted. Part of me felt vindicated, like some cosmic justice was finally at work. For once, the pedestal my sister had been on was shaky, and I could almost see it collapsing from a safe distance. I sat on my bed, staring at the boxes I'd already unpacked, letting the information sink in. Years of favoritism, years of being invisible, years of being dismissed. They were starting to pay off in a strange, silent way. My parents, who had spent so long celebrating appearances, had unknowingly created a situation that was turning against them. My sister's smugness, the one thing that had stung most in the past, was now facing a challenge she hadn't anticipated. And yet, even with that satisfaction, a pang of guilt hit me. Part of me wanted to intervene, to warn her, to step back into the chaos of my old life. But I resisted. This wasn't my fight anymore. I had left, and I was finally free. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the bitter smell filling my apartment, and let the news wash over me. The universe had a strange sense of balance. While I was rebuilding my life, my sister and her husband were starting to show cracks I had only predicted from afar. And as I sipped the coffee, a quiet smile crossed my face. For the first time, I realized that leaving wasn't just survival. It was the start of seeing things unfold exactly as they were meant to. By the second month, I had settled into a rhythm that felt almost foreign in its simplicity. I woke up in my own space, brewed my coffee exactly how I liked it, and no one judged the posters I put up on the walls or the books I stacked haphazardly. My apartment smelled faintly of old paper and fresh paint, a combination that somehow felt like freedom incarnate. Each morning I felt the tension from years of favoritism, neglect and invisible scars start to loosen, like a knot finally unraveling. I started noticing small victories, friends inviting me out, work achievements being acknowledged, the simple pleasure of cooking dinner just for myself. For the first time, I could make decisions without fear of judgment, without the ghost of my sister's shadow hovering in the background. Every action, whether unpacking a box or signing a new lease, was a claim on my life that no one could dispute. Even my thoughts began to shift. I reflected on all the years I had felt unseen, the constant comparisons, the silent rejection from my parents. But now, instead of anger, I felt clarity. I didn't need validation from them. I didn't need their approval. My own choices and my own happiness were enough. I walked to the window one evening, watching the city glow below me, and realized how far I had come. The freedom wasn't just physical, it was emotional. I had escaped not only the house, but the patterns that had held me captive for so long. And while I still carried the scars, they were no longer chains. They were reminders of survival, of strength, of the life I had chosen for myself. I had left the past behind, not bitterly, but with a quiet sense of empowerment. Yet even in this newfound peace, I knew the real test was yet to come. Watching the world I left behind continue without me, and seeing whether the family I had abandoned would finally realize what they had lost. Weeks had passed, and I was finally beginning to feel a rhythm in my new life, though my phone still buzzed occasionally with unanswered messages from my parents. I didn't pick up. Each ring felt like a tug at a wound I wasn't ready to reopen. From a safe distance, I watched the chaos unfold silently, letting the consequences of my absence settle around them without me intervening. I heard through mutual friends that my parents had been frantic at first, calling, texting, even sending someone to my old neighborhood to ask around. My sister was shocked too, probably realizing for the first time that her happiness had been built on my erasure. I imagined them sitting in my old living room, staring at the note, trying to rationalize it, trying to convince themselves it wasn't serious. But it was. I was gone. There was a strange satisfaction in just observing. I didn't have to argue or explain, didn't have to demand respect or make them acknowledge the years of favoritism and neglect. The power was in my absence. They were finally feeling the weight of their choices, and I could experience it from a safe distance without being dragged back into the storm. At the same time, I felt a subtle pang, a flicker of guilt. I loved them after all, at least in my own way. But love had never been enough to keep me there, to keep me visible in their world. My absence wasn't cruelty, it was self-preservation. I leaned back in my chair, sipping a cup of coffee, and watched the city lights flicker outside my window. For the first time, I felt completely untethered from the expectations, judgments, and manipulations of my old life. The silence was mine, and though I had no idea what tomorrow would bring, I knew one thing: I had finally reclaimed control, and there was no turning back. Months had passed since I left, and my life had taken on a rhythm that felt both strange and exhilarating. I woke up in a space that was completely mine, made choices that reflected me, and for the first time, my happiness didn't feel contingent on anyone else's approval. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and fresh laundry, a scent that had become my daily affirmation. I belonged to myself now. I still thought about my parents and my sister, but not with anger anymore. Instead, I reflected on the years of favoritism, the small betrayals, and the erasure I had endured, and realized that leaving had been the only way to truly reclaim my life. I didn't need them to apologize, to grovel, or even to understand. Their inability to value me had forged a strength in me I didn't know I had. Occasionally, I heard whispers through friends. My sister and her husband were struggling. My parents finally realizing that their golden child favoritism had consequences. Part of me felt a quiet satisfaction, but it wasn't about revenge. It was the knowledge that I had made the right choice for myself, and that was all the justice I needed. I decorated my apartment exactly how I wanted, filled it with the things I loved, and let my past settle into memory without bitterness. Every morning I woke up knowing I was in control, that my voice, my presence, and my life were finally acknowledged by me. I had turned a childhood of neglect and erasure into a life of autonomy, dignity, and empowerment. And as I sat by the window, sipping my coffee and listening to the quiet hum of my own world, I realized something profound. Leaving had been more than an escape. It had been a rebirth. I was finally visible, finally valued, and finally free. For the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone else to define me. I was enough,